in the red with the Nifty giving off nearly 200 points from the top. The Nifty is at around 25,600 at this level, and now we have joining us Kunal Kapoor, who is the CEO of Morningstar. Kunal, thank you very much for joining us on ET now. What are the foreign fund managers telling you with respect to India as an investment destination?
Yeah, it's certainly the case that if you look over the last few years, the allocations that foreign managers have to India has increased relatively materially. And I would separate both equities and fixed income because the stories are a little bit different. Certainly was the case that on the equity side, allocations to equities had started to climb some time back, and allocations in fixed income have started to climb once India was included in some of the benchmarks a few years ago. So in aggregate, I think India is still viewed very positively, and among global managers, the allocations to India have continued to inch up.
What's your view on the ongoing India-US trade negotiations? Do you think that there could be some impact with respect to flows till the time we get a resolution for this?
It's certainly possible, but most investors who are investing with a long-term view generally, price in these types of events well in advance. And so I would say that to the extent that there are people on the sidelines waiting to come in, that's probably not long-term money anyway. And going back to your earlier question, I think the reality is that the long-term money, the trend continues to be positive, whether or not the timing of those trade negotiations are completed soon or later.
Good afternoon. Let's talk about the exuberance that we've seen in the primary market. Now, the secondary market continues to be slightly choppy, but the kind of action that we're seeing in the primary market, do you believe this kind of action is warranted, or do you believe that there is some overbuying happening over here and there is some cause of concern?
Well, if you take a step back, obviously India this year has not done as well as in previous years. And so one of the most positive things that I think is coming out is that retail investors have stayed the course, right? So if you look at automated schemes, people continue to put money into the market in a thoughtful way, which I think is a good thing. Now, with IPOs, do you tend to get some degree of euphoria? Do you tend to get some people who are chasing performance? Absolutely. Is that likely happening here? It's entirely possible, but only time will tell. And I would think that that is the less important trend relative to the more important trend, which is people are building portfolios for the long run. And investors in India have been relatively resilient in the way that they are putting money to work, through vehicles such as SIFs.
Okay, and Kunal, also help us understand the impact of everything that's happening on the geopolitical front. Yes, there is more certainty now in terms of the trade deal between US and China, but on that same note, India still continues to face some uncertainty with the trade deal with US. Where do you think that narrative could go, and how could that impact the way the world views India?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's very big and difficult question to answer, but I think really what you want to focus on is, should investors care about it or not? And the reality is, if you're an investor and you'd gone to sleep 18 months ago and you were to wake up, today, for the most part, if you looked at markets, not much has changed, even though there's, in your terminology, been so much geopolitical noise. And I think the lesson there is that while the noise is interesting in the short term and maybe has some impact on year-to-year performance or year-to-year outcomes, if you're a long-term investor, it does not matter. And what you really want to do is you want to build wealth by staying the course, by having a diversified portfolio. And so what I would say is, based on the pattern that you're seeing with country by country, these deals are getting done and sorted out, one has to expect that India and the US will likely also come to a deal sooner or later. But I would submit that if you're a long-term investor, it probably doesn't matter to your calculus.
Kunal, how do you look at some of the passive funds coming into India, I mean, you spoke about the fact that there is two different ways to look at it. One is equities, and the other is the fixed income. With such global turmoil happening, and there's so much of currency fluctuations as well, there is the dollar returns which are which are coming into play here. So how do you see India in the overall basket of emerging market, like a China or a Korea or a Taiwan?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the currency part is definitely trickier. And if you're a dollar-based investor, it certainly introduces another element of risk that probably did not exist if you're, let's say, a local investor. And what I would say is, back to your earlier question about trade and the settlement around the tariff talks, I think that provides probably a clearer path for the currency. And to the extent that currency is weighing on investors' minds and is a mitigating factor in whether they choose to invest in India or not at this point, I would say that if the trade talks do get settled, that becomes an easier thing for those who are concerned about the path of the currency. Because you're right, it's kind of been an interesting year. The US dollar has weakened against many major currencies, but obviously that has not been the case against the rupee. And that clearly reflects the fact that the trade talks have had some impact in this context.
Kunal, it was a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you very much for joining us.